Hey, how's it going? This is Joe and Tell. Today we're going to be taking a look at the brand new Polk R200 bookshelf speakers. And this is the line right below their flagship Legend series. The R200 is the larger of the two bookshelf speakers in this lineup. The R100 uses a 5¼ inch driver. This is a 6½ inch turbine woofer, and what that is a design that allows it to be more rigid without adding weight. So this is using a foam core polypropylene cone, and very interesting design. This uses a 1-inch pinnacle ring radiator tweeter. They claim that this helps with directivity. This uses a specially designed export using eigentone filters to help with resonances.
It's produced by the modial interaction of magneto-reluctance and capacitive diractance.
On the back, you'll also find the 5-way binding posts. This is a passive speaker with a 4 ohm nominal impedance with a recommended rating between 30 and 200 watts. The sensitivity on this is 86 decibels. So for full disclosure, I need to say that Polk did send these in free for me to review, and I'm still allowed to say whatever I want about these speakers. That's part of the deal. And also, I will be doing some future ads for them, and I think they're gonna be funny. You'll see. Once again, I can say whatever I want in this video, and if I'm not fair, if you watch some other reviews where they do some measurements and it doesn't line up and I'm not saying what is actually true, you come back and tell me, all right? You check me, and that's how it's supposed to be. There should be some checks and balances. I did my best to make sure that what I'm saying is correct. Who is this not for? This is not for you if you're looking for the most compact speaker, because this does measure at 7.5 by 14.1 by 13.9 inches. This is not for you if $700 is not within your budget for a pair of bookshelf speakers. These aren't for you if space saving and simplicity matter to you, just because you will need an external amplifier for these since they're not powered. This is not for you if you want an exotic looking speaker. It's not gonna look like a seashell or anything kind of crazy, no weird shapes. It's just kind of an ordinary box. And if that's what you're looking for, these aren't it. Also, if you're not into having speaker stands, I recommend that these do go on some speaker stands, because you do want these above you ear level wise. So I wouldn't recommend these if you can't put the tweeter above ear level, because the off-axis response vertically does suffer. If you want to use these at a desk, these aren't powered, so just consider that. If you like a more diffuse and wide soundstage, these aren't it. These offer a more accurate depiction of what the soundstage is, so just keep that in mind. So who are these for? These are for you if you don't mind spending $700 on a pair of bookshelf speakers. If that's within your budget, then I think that these will be very good for music, watching TV, movies, and part of an entire home theater setup. Now, I also think that this would work well in a 2-channel setup with or without a sub, because they actually have pretty decent bass, and so you might be able to get away with not having a sub depending on the content and your expectations. These are for you if you like a rather neutral sound signature, something with a tiny bit of character but nothing that's gonna kind of overwhelm you with its own sound signature. These are also good if you don't mind a narrow directivity, meaning if you have a place that may be untreated and you have some reflections, sometimes a narrow directivity speaker is good for that situation. So what does it do extremely well? And in my opinion, I think it does a very good job of just being very clean sounding. It doesn't have a ton of resonances from the port, and they've really focused on making sure that there's no distortion and extra noises that aren't supposed to be there, and that's the point of their export design here, and as well as their cone. So this cone is designed to have less distortion by preventing the twisting motion when the woofer is moving in and out.
2 spurving bearings run a direct line with a panometric fan.
So overall, I thought that the sound was very clean sounding, and it's weird because it's not like something was added, it's just that stuff wasn't there that wasn't supposed to be there, and I appreciate that. Also, vocals, I think it does a very good job of projecting those forward, so it might be a little bit more than some people like, but in my listening tests, I kind of liked the effect. So vocals just sounded very clear and maybe not exactly neutral in that sense. That's the area where I think that they do have some boost, but it sounded very pleasing. And so that's something to take a look at if you like that sort of thing. The imaging on these is very precise, and so I could tell exactly where something was supposed to be. It wasn't diffuse, meaning it didn't sound wider or more, it didn't exaggerate it, but stuff sounded accurate, and that led to it having a very strong center image, which I really like. Now, I don't play these extremely loud, but from my testing, I felt like they could get pretty loud without distorting. In my situation, I didn't do any tests to see the max SPL capabilities. Just know that in most small to mid-sized rooms, I think that these can get loud enough. These do have a sound that, to me, would be what I would expect from more expensive speakers. So it sounds funny to say that they sound like more expensive speakers, but that's kind of the feeling that I get when I listen to them. Another thing that I think they do extremely well is the tweeter here. You can't poke it in because it'll poke you back. So that's handy if you have kids. And the last thing I think it does extremely well is they use a lot of computer aided modeling. So Scott Orth over there, I think he's done a great job looking at different aspects and things that you can fix. And he's really done a good job of embracing that and really kind of just using all that technology to improve the speakers. Part of that is the turbine cone, which I mentioned earlier, that prevents some of the bending and flexing of the cone when it's at high excursion. And his work with the export, which aims to reduce some of those resonances that you expect from most ports. The treble I found very smooth, detailed, but never fatiguing. And it almost kind of gave me that impression of a horn, which is very weird because this is obviously not a horn design, but maybe something to do with this Pinnacle ring radiator that kind of gives that effect. But that's kind of what I felt. I felt like it was kind of throwing out that sound. It was very kind of narrow like I expect from certain horns. Very interesting. So what does it do okay? And I would say what it does okay is the bass is hefty, but it doesn't play extremely deep. This is a pretty large enclosure and the driver is a 6.5 inch. And so you'd kind of expect maybe that it'd be able to produce some deeper bass, and it kind of gets on the border of that, but doesn't fully go for it. And I think that's because they were aiming for that lower distortion that I was talking about. They claim a frequency response of 51 hertz to 38 kilohertz, which I've measured in room that actually goes a little bit deeper than that. But I'm glad that they were very conservative. I think the looks are pretty good with their rounded corners, even with the grill on. You see, I've never seen a grill that is rounded over like this. I thought it was a nice touch with the kind of heather gray grill. Very cool looking, a little bit different. And even the vinyl on here is not perfectly black. It's a little bit kind of like grayish, so kind of cool. With regards to soundstage and depth, I felt like there was some layering there, and so I liked that. The soundstage wasn't exaggerated like I'm saying, but it's also not extremely wide depending on your room. The other thing that I noticed, maybe something to do with the frequency response, is that the soundstage did sound lifted a little bit. So instead of being here, it sounded like it was a little bit higher. So I'm not sure what is causing that effect. So what are some downsides? So one downside is I feel like the vinyl wrap, although it looks pretty good, I've seen other speakers in this price range that may have a nicer finish, but this is the one that I have. They do have other colors and maybe those look a little bit better. Again, one of the downsides, if you really want a speaker that has extremely deep bass, this isn't it. There are others that do aim to provide that, but they also sacrifice maybe the max capability as far as loudness. The price on these might be a little bit steep for some people, but there is a speaker for every budget. So like I said, the sweet spot is rather narrow in my testing, so you do have to play around with toe in and try to really find that sweet spot and dial it in. I mean, it's not an issue, but like I said, it's not extremely wide. Now, I did find that there is a dip at 3 kilohertz depending on where you are relative to the tweeter, and I found that it is better if you're below it, and so just keep that in mind. These are not perfectly flat speakers. There are some active speakers that use DSP to get the speakers to sound even flatter, but in my experience these are pretty good and very similar actually to some other speakers that I really like, the Wharfedale Diamond 12.1s. The other downside is at the loudest volumes. Of course, with this crazy looking port, I wanted to see if I could get it to chuff, and at certain frequencies I was able to make that happen. I don't know if it's realistic, but just something I tested and I was able to make happen. So what are some alternatives? So right off the bat, you have the Polk Reserve R100, a smaller 5.25 inch bookshelf speaker, and that's $100 less at $599. You have the bigger brother, the L200, part of their Legend series, and that one is $14.99 a pair. And last, you might want to take a look at the Wharfedale Diamond 12 series, because I did like the way they sounded, and these have a very similar sound signature. Alright, so now I'm going to place these on the speaker leaderboard. Alright, so we're here at the speaker leaderboard, and as of right now, this product has not been released, so I can't post this because this is a public leaderboard. So check back and click on the link down below and you can see where these rank. But just know that it's gonna rank pretty high. Best overall sound, I'm gonna have to put it maybe right here above the Diamond 12.1, below the ARB 51. These are powered, and below the Denton 85th. So yeah, very high up. As far as best under 1,000, I would have to say it's gonna go somewhere around here, maybe below the Klipsch, the 5s, just because I like all the features on here. And so this is not only about sound quality. So if you're into technical stuff, stick around because I'm gonna take a look at some measurements. All right, so here we are looking at the R200s, and as you can see here, it looks pretty flat. I like the top end response, and all you'll see here is a slight dip around 3K. This is the crossover specifically on these speakers. And then the rest, you can see some up and downs here, but that could be my room. This is an in-room measurement, so I should say that. This is not an anechoic or pseudo-anechoic, not using a clipple. If you want something like that, check out my buddy Aaron from Aaron's Audio Corner. He does stuff like that. So here you can see it's flat. And then if you include the port, so here it is with the port, so you get a little bit of extra boost. So this is an average in the listening window, meaning it's in front of the speaker. So I measured these at 83.7 dB, 83.7. So 3 decibels down from that would be 80.7 dB. And so at that point, around 38 hertz, and that's what I'm getting in room, including the port. Now they're claiming around 50 something hertz, and so it's well below that in room, which is what you'd expect. 80.3. If you don't include what I measured with the port, we have 52.3, so right around what they're saying. So here's the listening window, and you see this dip that I was talking about earlier. If you measure below the tweeter, so right in between the woofer and the tweeter, you get a flatter response actually, right? So that's what you're seeing in green. So this is above the tweeter, and you see that you have that crazy nasty dip. And so this is typical of most speakers. You just don't want to be above the tweeter. I did a few crude off-axis response measurements. So this is 0 degrees, and then 11.25 degrees, and 22.5, 45 degrees. And as you can see, it's all kind of tracking pretty well until about 3 kilohertz. So you can see the tweeter changes off axis. You don't really want to go too far. You don't want to go 67. I mean, it starts getting crazy after that. What you'll just notice is that the further you go off axis, the lower the tweeter gets, but not necessarily the rest of the speaker. So again, this is a crude measurement. Somebody who has a proper near field scanner might find that this is not correct, but this is kind of what I've noticed also, meaning that I have to tone in at a certain rate. If I go too far off axis, I notice that it starts dropping off, and so you really have to play around with it and make sure that you're really within that sweet spot. For anyone interested, this is a close measurement of the woofer by itself. Now this is just really close, so you can still see that there's some bleed, but this is a tweeter by itself, so you can kind of see where it's crossing over around here, and the port. You can see a little resonance here. Finally, something that I thought was kind of interesting was that this is the R200, and look at these Diamond 12.1, this Wharfdale Diamond 12.1 that I really liked. And so I like this sound signature, and this is very similar except less of a dip here and at a different spot. The crossover's at a different spot, but you can see a similarity here. If I do psychoacoustic smoothing, which is generally what you kind of expect to hear, you can see that these kind of have a similar frequency response, and that's very interesting. So there you have it. My overall conclusion is that I like the overall sound. I thought that they were very pleasing to my ears, and it just had a nice presentation. I felt like it was good, especially for TV viewing and movie viewing, because it kind of enhanced the vocal intelligibility, and that's a problem that a lot of people have. So this is part of a bigger lineup, and so if you wanted to get a center channel, or if you wanted to get floor standing speakers and perhaps use these as rears, they even have height channels, so you can find a configuration that works for you. So anyway, that's it. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure to like, subscribe, ring the bell to be notified when I upload new videos. Take care. Bye-bye.